Welcome into another edition of the GigEm247 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined as always by Carter Karels. Little therapy session today, a little preview of Tennessee. We're going to review the Alabama game a little bit and then look ahead to the Aggies' upcoming trip to Knoxville. Carter, welcome in and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, sir. I'm playing therapist today. I guess we're both. So happy to join. I'll be in Knoxville this weekend. So hopefully for everyone watching this, better result.
Tough loss for A&M this past week, and that's to put it mildly, a 26-20 defeat to Alabama. First place in the SEC was on the line. The first half of the game, for the most part, I think went how A&M would have wanted it to go. They entered the break leading 17-10, but it was Alabama that completely dominated the second half, outscored A&M 16-3, with A&M's points coming at the very end. The Alabama's defensive line, give them some credit, made some big plays. Jalen Milroe, who really stepped up to the plate and made some big downfield throws to Caleb Burton, and just kind of drove the dagger into A&M fans' hearts with a couple big time throws. But tough result and one A&M needs to put in the rearview mirror quickly because Tennessee a tough trip's coming up next.
Yeah, I mean, I want to first start with saying that the season isn't over. I mean, if you win this weekend in Knoxville, then you have your off week, your season looks much different. I mean, there's a lot riding on this upcoming game, but you come out with a win, you kind of end the road streak, you feel so much better about yourself, and hey, it's possible that Bama's the second best team in the SEC or going to be in the SEC championship game, and you went toe to toe with them, and hey, you got your whole season in front of you. Who knows? Maybe they lose to LSU, and maybe they lose to Tennessee. But at the same time, it's hard for me to sugarcoat what we saw last Saturday.
Yeah.
I just can't stress enough how much of a missed opportunity that game was. First of all, let's just start with, I don't know if you're ever going to be playing that bad of an Alabama team, or at least in recent history. I don't know if A&M has played that bad of an Alabama team. I say bad, in relative terms. I mean, they still are going to win 10 plus games and all that. But in relative terms, that's as bad as a Bama team as you'll play. You're in front of the third largest crowd in Kyle Field history. That really impacted the game. Alabama had 14 penalties. 9 of them occurred pre-snap. Alabama lost the turnover battle. Alabama ran for, 23 yards on 26 carries. And you went into halftime with a 7-point lead. And, I mean, all those you laid out, I mean, if you'd laid out some of that to me before the game, I'd say, oh, yeah, that's an A&M win.
Yeah.
So to lose that game, especially when you can pinpoint so many if they just did this, if they just did that, whether it's decision-making, adjustments, plays that were decided by an inch. I mean, just even think about a punt that just barely lands into the end zone, right? Like just big plays that were an inch away from being a different result. There were so many of those you could look at. And that's why I think this loss, you can't really sugarcoat it because A&M had every opportunity to win this game. They should have won the game, and they should be 3-0 in SEC West play right now. And if that had happened, you're likely looking at a team that's going to Atlanta this December, and probably not happening now. Again, the whole season's still in front of you. You can rebound. But it's going to be a challenge for this team to run the table. You still got Tennessee, Ole Miss, LSU, all 3 ranked teams on the road. Jimbo Fisher has not won a road game against a ranked opponent since 2016. Tennessee has the 4th longest home winning streak in college football, 12 games. And so, stats, do they mean anything about the upcoming game? I don't know, but history would say that it's going to be very difficult for A&M to win all three of those games. So that it just felt it was such a missed opportunity. At the same time, A&M still has a chance to kind of right their wrongs.
No doubt. I agree with you. And look, there were positives from this game as well, right? Like the way that Edgerrin Cooper played and the way he's been playing the past couple of weeks, he has been playing out of his mind and has taken kind of that leap that you hoped he would take this season, and deserves a ton of credit for the way this defensive line is playing. You felt really good about the way they're playing and what they were able to do to this Alabama defensive line. Those are major positives, but you're not really talking about it this week because you fell short against Alabama, right? And everybody's kind of looking at it now saying, okay, they're looking ahead to that road schedule and trips to Tennessee, trips to Ole Miss, trips to LSU. I agree with you on what a win at Tennessee would mean. To go into the bye at 5-2, I think would kind of settle some of that noise, at least for a couple weeks, and allow the staff to kind of regroup, see what they need to do the second half of the year. I think you've got very winnable games at home against South Carolina and Mississippi State, obviously. And so, a lot of their goals are out in front. I agree with you. That's one of the things I had written down in this Alabama game too, is the 14 penalties, the 9 false starts, the winning the turnover battle. But it's those little things, right? Like I think this we have to talk too about the special teams factor in this. You have some nice returns here and there by Anai Smith. We obviously saw that in the Arkansas game, but they have got to get the field goal, mechanics figured out, because the block kick, that's 3 points that if you have that back at the end of the game, that changes a lot in what you can do, what you're playing. And it's not the first time. They've had other issues with field goals being blocked and that being a huge swing in the game, not just this year, but in past years too. You look at that Mississippi State game last year. That was a huge swing in that game, was the blocked field goal return. And A&M is actually lucky that, Alabama committed a penalty on that play and brought the touchdown back. Otherwise, you're looking at an even bigger hole to climb out of. So I do think A&M just, it's some of those little things, right? Like being able to convert a 3rd and short, or, not having a field goal block. I think they're just, but they've been there before, and this game would have meant so much to kind of take that next step, because A&M entered this game sitting at 4-1. If you're sitting at 5-1 in control of your own destiny in the SEC West, that would have been huge for this program. Instead, you're back talking about Jimbo Fisher and the offense and the offensive line, and you're talking that during a week that you've got to head to Knoxville, which is a really, really difficult place to play, and we'll get to that in a little bit as well.
Yeah, and I want to call a spade here. I feel like the coaching really got in the way, and it has for part of the season. I mean, first of all, I think at the beginning of the season, we saw some guys playing that, and starting that I don't know should have been playing or starting. It felt like they were playing the wrong guys at certain positions. And then, they head to Miami, and the adjustments just weren't there. They did that cornerback blitz thing, and, they eventually figured it out. But by the time they did, it was too late. And Connor Wigman was pressured on more dropbacks in that game than any quarterback in the country has been pressured in a game this season. And then, they figure things out against Arkansas, Auburn, and ULM, but you're thinking, well, these teams are terrible. Like, let's see them against a good competition. Now, I don't want to totally minimize what they did in those games, because, hey, 14 sacks in 2 games in SEC play, I don't care if you're playing Rice and UAB, 14 sacks in 2 games is freaking bananas. And this pass rush is legit. This linebacking core is legit. But what have we been saying? This secondary is a real problem. And it's not just number 28 on the island, but it's other players in that back end too. And when we talk about adjustments, there was a few ones that never really made sense to me. We talked to Layden Robinson on Monday. He said, yeah, Bama did a great job adjusting. We kind of did the same thing in the second half that we did in the first half. The offense, first of all, just had no answer for Alabama's, pressures. And it just felt like Max Johnson, it was only a matter of time before he either got hurt or rattled, because he was taking so many hits. And you just felt like, man, maybe they should do some quick game here like Alabama did to begin the second half, and it just never happened. You had these slow developing passing plays. It didn't seem like he had many safe outs. And I think Max Johnson deserves some of the blame for holding the ball too long and maybe not hitting some open guys. But, you had Chase Bissonis at right tackle, who's really struggled this year, and you've continued to ride him. Bryce Foster at center has really struggled. You've continued to roll with him. On the defense side of the ball, they rode DeBerry until fourth quarter, and they just finally said, man, we got to replace this guy. But with DeBerry, the thing with him was I felt like they did him a disservice as far as not giving him enough safety help. It just felt like he was on an island the entire game. And, the pass rush was incredible in the first half. But in the second half, it was really good at sometimes, and it was non-existent other times. And those pivotal third down situations, those third and longs, they only converted 4 of 12 third downs, but all 4 of them came in like very critical down and distance situations. And so, it's not just game management stuff. It's adjustments that they failed to do. And then game management, I mean, I can kind of be convinced about 1 or 2 of them. You can convince me, hey, pin them deep in their territory, punting on 4th and 6 kind of thing, or got to take a timeout in this situation, But when you lump them all together, it's like, oh my gosh, it was so conservative. And when you're playing a team like Alabama, you got to go for it at some point. And I just felt like after they didn't convert that 4th and 1 on the first drive of the game, it's almost like they lost all confidence in their ability to either, get a first down in short yardage situations, but also taking chances. They just didn't take enough chances. And we don't have to go into all of them. I mean, I don't know if you want to, but it's just overall too conservative.
The one I was going to say is I think the one that there seems to be a lot of question about too, and was the strategy before halftime. And I can, in a way, I wonder if it kind of goes back to what happened the previous year against Alabama, where they had that late drive in the second quarter, and then Haynes King throws an interception right before halftime, and that's a momentum swing going back Alabama's way. I wonder how much that was in his mind, thinking, okay, we've got a 17-10 lead. What we can't afford to have happen is exactly what happened with Haynes King last year, and that gives kind of Alabama that momentum heading into the second half. Some of them – go ahead.
What that made me think of was I was like, they don't have Haynes King at quarterback. That's all I was going to say.
But it's one of those things. I mean, you saw Max Johnson make a mistake in a big moment in the second half, and they were just those opportunities there, right? Like Bryce Anderson gets the pick on Jalen Milroe, and then you give it right back to Alabama right after that. The Edrin Cooper hit where jarred loose from Jalen Milroe, and A&M, is kind of around, and it's just those missed opportunities that you're just thinking, man, if they had gotten a couple of those, this game probably turns out different, but they didn't. So, now they've got to kind of rebound. They've got to kind of refocus, because the challenge coming up next might, is arguably just as tough given the road woes. We're going to talk about the fact that Tennessee has been darn near unbeatable at home under Josh Heupel. And so we're going to get into Tennessee right after a quick break. Welcome back into the GigEm247 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined by Carter Karels. Carter, tough assignment this week, and A&M's got to move on quick. It was an emotional game against Alabama, and now you head into Knoxville, where Tennessee's won 12 straight home games under Josh Heupel, dating back to the 2021 season. A&M, obviously, as we mentioned, has lost 7 straight road games, dating back to their last one was that Missouri win back in 2021. So a couple things working against A&M. What are some of the things that are kind of top of mind for you heading into this game?
Well, I think first, when we entered this season, I think a lot of people felt that A&M was one of the more mysterious, enigmatic, unpredictable teams going into the year. Tennessee is kind of that team in the SEC now. No one knows quite how good they are. They don't know, hey, could they beat a Georgia? Could they beat a Bama? Could they beat A&M? They haven't really played anybody yet. They lost the game to Florida, obviously, and Florida is okay, but they're nothing special. And so you kind of look at Tennessee and you say, okay, Joe Milton, we've heard all about him. We've heard on every broadcast of every Tennessee game they could throw a ball 100 yards. And what we've heard all about that big arm, but that really hasn't been what they've done this year. You mentioned it. You have some really good numbers, but they've been a run-heavy offense this year. They've been highly effective in the ground game, which plays into A&M's favor because A&M, it's totally the opposite of last season. Last season, teams didn't even throw against A&M. I think among Power 5 teams, they had like the third lowest pass attempts attempted against them last season. And so that it kind of skewed the numbers a little bit, but the secondary looked the part. They looked good, but the run defense was terrible. This year, it's the opposite. The run defense has been solid, one of the better ones in the SEC. The pass rush has been phenomenal, but that secondary is just a mess. They have no answers and can't cover anybody back there. And so, we saw Jalen Milroe going into the game. It's like, this guy's not very good, or, he's decent, but can he really beat you with his arm? Can he really throw for 300-plus yards? And look what happened. He did it. He threw for 321 yards. He had the game of his life. He'll be telling his grandkids about it one day. Can Joe Milton do the same? Different quarterback than Jalen Milroe, obviously, but can he do the same? I think that's the big question. And I don't know. I don't think without Brew McCoy, I don't know if this passing game is just going to be elite down the field. I think A&M, their defense will be in decent shape. I think what I'm more worried about in A&M's case is their offense. Let's look at the last 2 games, right? Second half has been downright atrocious for this offense. I think 6 points in that full game. The second half versus Arkansas, second half versus Bama. The offensive line has all sorts of problems. They're kind of picking up where they left off last year. And they've been healthy for the most part. It's not like they're missing a ton of guys like they were at times last year. And so it's just been a real struggle. And you're going against a team that ranks number 1 in the country in sacks per game. And again, Tennessee has not played many good teams, any good teams really. And so how legit is that? How it's we kind of found out about A&M. All this pass rush is super legit after the Bama game. But with Tennessee, I think we're going to figure out just how legit it is and whether A&M can respond to, it's hard on the road to communicate and to get your signals in and, your snap cadence. How do you do that? It's handling just pre-snap stuff can be much more difficult. So yeah, I think I'm more focused on the offense. And I think the defense matches up fairly well with Tennessee's offense.
Yeah, the 2 things that concern me going into this game are obviously turnovers and big plays. And you look at that Arkansas game, A&M had that game in control, pick 6 coming out of halftime, kind of changes and A&M, obviously gets the Chris Russell interception, which which kind of shifts things back in their favor. But that was a big play and huge momentum. You look at the Auburn game, the fumble kind of let Auburn back into the game. You look at this past weekend, turnovers again. Turnovers have been a problem, and A&M is in the negatives right now in turnover margin. They forced some turnovers against Alabama, but they haven't really forced a ton of turnovers so far this year. Protecting Max Johnson's obviously the key. And yeah, like I mentioned, but I mentioned this to you before the show that I think Tennessee's a bit much misunderstood in what people think like Tennessee kind of is. Like you mentioned Joe Milton with that big arm and, throwing it 80 yards downfield and the ball clearly, let's not kid ourselves. The ball jumps out of his hands. I watched their game South Carolina, and the ball jumps out of his hands and throws a good velocity, but he also struggled with decision making. He had 2 interceptions in that game, and one came on just kind of misreading a coverage, thought it was cover 2, missed a safety in the middle of the field on cover 3. And I think honestly the bigger concern is the running game. We mentioned it that Tennessee kind of relies on 3 guys, Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, and Dylan Sampson. They're averaging 230 yards per game on the ground. So this it's to slow down Tennessee. It starts with slowing that running game because they're going to get into tempo and then they're going to get the ball out of Milton's hands quickly, and that's kind of how they want to go. But he struggled on third down, and I think that's probably the avenue for A&M to win this game is to actually get Tennessee into third and medium and long. 41.7% on third down and 7 to 9 passing so far this year. 45% on passes longer than 10 plus yards. Overall on third down, he's 46.3% completion percentage. So those numbers, if you can get him into third down, I feel like you kind of have a chance. And you look at the numbers and they rank near the bottom in explosive plays and through the air. And so, I think everybody kind of thinks about Hendon Hooker and what they did last year, but I think this offense operates a little bit differently. Now, with that said, big plays in the running game, that's been their thing. You look at that first touchdown against South Carolina, to draw right up the middle for 30 plus yards for a touchdown. And they have 12 runs of 30 or more yards this year already. So their explosive runs, their explosive gains actually come through the running game, but it comes keeping you off balance, the tempo, going quickly, and getting you out of position. So, if A&M can be good against the run and force this game and see if Joe Milton can beat you. You forced Jalen Milroe to beat you. You had some breakdown in coverages, but force Joe Milton to do the same and take your chances. I think that's your best opportunity to come out with a win. I do have concerns on the defensive side of the ball, on the offensive side of the ball, because you watch this Tennessee defense. They are fast. They fly around. They're getting to the ball. They get after the quarterback. So whether A&M can move the ball are the question, and whether they can get the running game going, because I think they need to, are kind of the questions I have going into this game.
Yeah, you mentioned with Milton, I totally agree. Make him prove to you that he can go off. But the one caveat is you got to adjust. Like if
he does start to go off, it's going to help.
Yeah, like with Milroe, you found out fairly early on, he's on today. And Jermaine Burton is having the game he's going to tell his grandkids about one day. I love saying that. But once that's happened enough, what do they say? That the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again, expecting the same different result. Like, I just totally butchered that, but you know what I'm saying. And that's kind of what happened against Alabama. They not a lot of safety help, didn't replace the barrier, really give them that much help until it was kind of too late. If Milton is on, you got to find some sort of adjustment. And this offense, the same way, the second half has been a tough one for them. We mentioned it, but it doesn't matter if you go into halftime with a 10-point lead. If you're putting up 3 points at in the second half on the road, that is not that is less than ideal, obviously. But yeah, I think early downs is going to be really important for both teams because with Tennessee, if they're so dead set on the running game and A&M stuffs it up and they can get them in these 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10 situations, their pass rush can come alive on those downs and their DBs can hold long enough to get a stop. But if you're getting these 3rd and 3s, 3rd and 2s, it's a totally different story. And for A&M, haven't run the ball well at all this year. They averaged 1.9 yards per carry against Bama. They'd only run for less than 2 yards per carry 3 other times in the Jimbo era. And it's just been a rough one. I think they found something in Le'Veon Moss, but if your blocking's not good enough up front, that's a problem. And then in the passing game, you've really seen these running backs struggle as pass blockers. I'd love to see Max Wright in those situations more. He's such a great blocker. I think he could really help A&M in those 3rd and long situations. But generally speaking, if A&M can get in those 3rd and shorts more, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3, it'll help them because it felt like there was so many 3rd and longs against Bama where they just had no chance. That pass rush just came right at Max Johnson, and it was hard for him to make a lot of plays. He's a mobile guy, but not mobile enough if he's got 3 guys in his face. So, early downs will be important, and I think we could totally see A&M winning this game. They just have to adjust, and they got to play a clean game on offense.
Yeah. Earlier, I think I said Caleb Burton. Obviously, you meant Jermaine Burton. Obviously, both of them. But I agree with you on that. I think they have to adjust. They have to get a sense early in the game. Can their secondary hold up against this Tennessee offense? And they're going to get tested. I guarantee you, after watching last week's game and sitting at home and obviously coming off a bye, Tennessee's going to test A&M early down the field. And so you've got to be able to roll over safety help. You've got to be able to do some things and mix up some coverages maybe to give some help. I agree with you. I think that's going to be kind of one of the big tests. And then, one of the best ways because I think teams are kind of starting to realize that A&M, is kind of what they are, and you're going to start seeing teams kind of force A&M to try to beat you through the air and kind of load up that box and force Max Johnson to beat you, bring pressure. And so, you've got to find a way to run the ball. Whether it's I like what you mentioned about Max Wright. Maybe it's getting Ernest Crownover in there or in kind of big situations and having him as a blocker. Maybe that's what you do to kind of open up some more holes. But they've got to be better in that regard. And I'm kind of up in the air on which way. I know we do our predictions on Friday. I'm kind of up in the air which way I'm gonna go on this because you can see defensively some of the the matchups that maybe work in A&M's favor, but this one's going to be tough. You're going to have to go into a great environment. Going to have to stay ahead of schedule. A&M has to stay ahead of schedule, avoid penalties, especially pre-snap penalties, and be efficient and protect the ball. That's one of the biggest things. They have not done a good job of that on the road. And we mentioned some of those games last year. They've got to get off to a good start on the road. I feel like that's one of the things when you look at where they've struggled on the road. They put themselves in an early hole against South Carolina, put themselves in an early hole against Ole Miss, and then you're just climbing from behind, and then the crowd's into the game, and it's just kind of like everything snowballs from there. So those are a couple of the things I kind of see as keys. You're kind of keys to the game to kind of wrap everything up here.
Yeah. Number one, being willing to adjust. Two, having a feel for the game. These big time decisions, you got to get them right, or at least you got to get most of them right. But you can't get most of them wrong, and that's what happened against Alabama. I'm with you. They got to start well, but to me, I want to see them play a complete full game. I want to see them, if they lose because Tennessee's really good, but they played a complete game and they improved in some areas. I mean, I know the loss would be a terrible result. Fans wouldn't like it, but that would encourage you about the team improving as far as playing complete games. We just haven't seen that yet. We've seen 2.5 games from Max Johnson. He had a great half against Auburn. Didn't play the whole game there. Arkansas, Alabama, we've talked about it. So playing a complete game, being clean. I think, not turning it over, at least not a lot, not getting a lot of false start penalties, not getting delayed games, not having to call a timeout because you got 12 guys on the field. Just things we've seen from this A&M team on the road over the last couple of years. You can't have that. That you can't beat yourself. And that's probably the best way to put it. Another key, not beating yourself. And then really probably the last one, we haven't talked about it, is can a receiver not named Aniyah Smith do some damage? Because Evan Stewart has been banged up, but at the same time, he's Evan Stewart. I mean, I am kind of baffled how underutilized he is in this offense. When you saw him with Connor Wigman, the chemistry was there. You saw it in the Ole Miss OSU game last year. You saw it against Miami, New Mexico, really the beginning of the season. He was getting 10-plus targets a game. He's getting 100-plus yards a game with Connor Wigman at quarterback. Connor, to his credit, he found the dudes. Last year, Moose was the guy who stepped up. He had great chemistry with him. Donovan Green, another one. I felt like Connor could find those guys. We haven't seen Max do it. It's kind of been Jake Johnson and the Aniyah show. Only 9 – the receivers accounted for 9 catches against Alabama. Evan Stewart had 1 catch in the final 3.5 quarters of that game. And if you're me, like, you almost want to force Evan Stewart the ball. You watch these other teams like Missouri, and they throw it to Luther Burden like every single play. And I'm just like, Evan Stewart is a top 10, top 15 talent at receiver in the country. He should be getting 10-plus targets a game, 4 to 5 deep shots a game. If you got to get him bubble screens and jet sweeps to kind of get him going, do it. But do not go 3.5 quarters without really throwing him the ball that much. I just don't understand that. And then you got to kind of have another guy step up maybe too. I think Moose is a guy where when he's in a featured role, he's awesome. But when it's limited, it's almost like the pressure gets to him or something because we see him make mistakes. He had the drop against Alabama. He had the penalties against New Mexico. He had the drop against Arkansas last year. But then we've seen these flashes of greatness. So can he be mistake-free and be, a guy who can get you 50 or 60 yards? Noah Thomas has been extremely banged up all season. An injury that's just kind of been nagging for him. It's been hard for him to make much of an impact the last couple of weeks. And, going into this season, we really talked about how this receiving core, I thought it was the best in the SEC.
Yeah.
And they haven't been able to show that just because injuries and your starting quarterback getting hurt, your protection being wrong. So they ultimately just got to find another option beyond Aniyah because you can't sustain drives if he's your only legitimate option at receiver.
And I think to your point, right, Evan Stewart has gone up and shown he can make plays even when plays aren't there. You look at that ball he caught against Alabama last year between, basically over 2 defenders. Yep. Like you find a way to get him the ball, and we're not going into the James Franklin like throw the ball. That's not what we're saying. That's not where we're going.
Do a deep post.
A deep post. That's not where we're going with this. But we're get some jet sweeps, get some bubble screens, just get him involved early, and that'll start to open things up for Aniyah Smith as well. And you mentioned you just see it with Moose when he's in the game and what he's able to do. You look at that kind of that underneath route that he takes for a big gain. Mm-hmm. The last game when he's involved early and he can really help you in these big games, and he's done it in some big games in the past. And So I agree with you. I just think you need to get your guys, feed the studs. You need to find a way to get Evan Stewart involved early. You need to find a way to get Moose involved early, and everything will kind of flow off of that. If you've got to have a defense thinking about those guys, everything will kind of flow off that. So definitely a big one, and we will be here to break it down next week as A&M heads into a bye week, a much needed bye week, to be honest, coming out of this Tennessee game. And so, I think final thoughts, if A&M is heading into the bye week at 5-2, they're in pretty good spot. I know there's some disappointment about the Alabama and the Miami game. 4-3, you start to get into maybe a lot of pressure in the second half of the year. So going to be an interesting week. 2:30 kickoff on 2:30 Central Time kickoff on CBS. And again, we will be back to break it down. Thanks again for following along. If you're following these videos, be sure to like and share the videos and subscribe on the YouTube channel and Spotify and iTunes to get notifications every time a new video drops. Until then, enjoy the game, everybody, and we will see you guys soon.